The one thing to take away from this is you'll see the number of grants and the dollar amounts are significantly lower in 2022 than they were in 2021. If you recall, we had to amend the budget a couple times in 2021 to make up for the surge in demand for the program. My theory is people were stuck at home looking around their house going, I gotta fix this place. And so people did a lot more projects. And but we were clearly going beyond the resources that we had for the program. And so we were successful with the new guidelines that you all approved for 2022 in rolling the program expenditures back. And we're back on track, even slightly below, not much, but slightly below what the revenue is. So that's good. The program is back to a sustainable level. Redevelopment, we've already talked about sand companies, so I'm just going to skip right by this. But getting this mostly ready to go by the end of 2022 was a big deal for the EDA. A couple of redevelopment projects, one of which you heard about tonight. That, again, we did most of the work to get them ready to go in 2022. There'll be a two-family dwelling built later this year at 4824 56th. And then the 8-unit townhome development that you heard about at the council meeting tonight at 34th and Douglas. Both of these we expect to start construction sometime later this year, probably in the summer. And then finally, there are a lot of other kind of smaller activities that the EDA does on an ongoing basis. We purchased, for example, the new Welcome to Crystal signs you may have seen on some of our county road entrances to the city that have our new population number, which we want to tout a little bit because we added over 1,000 people between 2010 and 2020, which is great. And our new city logo, which is nicer than the old one. Also the storefront improvement grant, the first recipient of that was Elysian Playhouse on 42nd Avenue, that mural in the second image. And then finally we continue to pay for the flowers and planting materials for the planter boxes. Both that and the signs are sort of a cooperative venture with Public Works. We pay the cash costs and Public Works does the actual placement and installation. So we also continue to have sentence to service pickup litter on our main commercial corridors. And then we continue to do whatever we can to promote our local businesses and always are contacting them and try to help them in any way we can. And then finally, as a kind of a blight prevention strategy, the EDA provides funding for senior community services, which is intended to help seniors stay in their homes by helping them with household chores and other things that might ultimately accumulate to a point where they become a negative influence on the neighborhood. Not the seniors, I'm talking about the property. Right, we want to help people stay in their homes and be able to maintain the community. And then finally, there's a map on here that just shows you the EDA properties in light blue that we haven't figured out how to sell yet, and the two that we plan to sell this year are in the darker blue. 34th and Douglas, and then up at 4824 56th. Some of you may remember this map had a lot more blue on it just a few years ago. We've been working through the EDA properties, and the ones that are left, as I said, are pretty challenging. So with that, I'll pause and ask if the EDA commissioners have any questions on the 2022 annual report.
David?
I don't have a question, but I just have a comment. I saw the Welcome to Crystal sign on Bass Lake, and it just really popped out at me. So props for that, because it looks really cool, and I thought it really jumped out at me. And I don't know if other cities put their logo on the street sign.
Robbinsdale does.
Okay.
And New Hope.
Cool. Well, ours pops better because of the logo. But, yeah. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I actually got a comment from a call from one of our constituents that said, hey, thanks for that sign, that looks really awesome.
Nice,
so,
yeah.
Great. Any other comments? Okay. The staff is going to talk about the 2023 work plan.
Yes, Madam President, thank you. At the end of this presentation, I will ask if you're comfortable taking a vote to approve this for this year. Home improvement grants. I talked a little bit about financial sustainability. I update this chart every year based on actual revenue and expenditure trends. There's a lot on here, but basically the top chart is showing those blue bars are the tax increment we're receiving from this older housing district that will expire at the end of 2025, and that's when the revenue will stop flowing from that district into the TIF fund. So through 2025, on the bottom chart, you see those the green part of the bars, that's basically the surplus of the revenue in excess of the home improvement grants that we expect to be funding during those years. So we're going to be saving that surplus, and then going back up to the upper chart, you see those big red bars beginning in 2026. We're basically spending what we saved until the money runs out, until we've obligated and expended all of the increment from that housing district. So based on what we can see now, we believe the available increment from that district will fund the home improvement grants through 2029. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but as far as what to do about that. But so that's kind of the financial status of the home improvement grant program. Redevelopment. I know based on what you might hear from the community that it's hard to believe, but our retail vacancy rate is extraordinarily low in Crystal. It is around 5%. That is low by any standard compared to almost any city. We just don't have a lot of retail vacancy. What that means for redevelopment is that owners of retail property, most of them aren't the businesses, they're just real estate owners, investors, have very little incentive to sell. So it's kind of a good problem to have in that we don't have that many vacant storefronts compared to many other cities. But it also makes it much harder for numbers to work for redevelopment that would kind of transform what is sort of our downtown area around Becker Park into a more economically dense area than it is today. So we had developers look at 3 specific properties, which I called out here in the slide, and they couldn't make the numbers work based on what the property owners wanted for the property to sell it, even with a full 25 years of a redevelopment TIF district based on market rate apartments. Not affordable housing, market rate apartments. So that's a big challenge. Again, it's kind of a good problem to have. We don't have dozens of acres of vacant land looking for something to do with it. But we do have a lot of kind of low economic density property in the city, and I'm not sure how that would be transformed. And that's clearly a policy question about whether it should be transformed. But it's just a reality, a fact. We will continue to work on this. We'll continue to meet with the developers. We've got another developer meeting next week. We met with another one last week, and the week before that, a different one. So there are developers looking at Crystal, and they're willing to put some time into trying to pencil out a deal, and it just doesn't work. Our goal is to try to get another development deal put together for 2024 construction. And we also want to try to do some kind of a transformational reconstruction or realignment of that intersection of Broadway and Douglas Drive. That is kind of at the heart, as you'll see on, I think, the next slide, that is kind of at the heart of the part of this redevelopment area that has some of the lowest value properties, and that is also the area then where redevelopment might be the most likely to happen over time. So here's that slide. I talked a little bit about economic density. This is kind of a rough proxy for it. It's basically what the county assessor values these properties per acre of land. So we're just trying to illustrate, and you may have seen this in other cities. Ramsey County did a study of this, and I think Hennepin County is working on it. But it's a rough proxy for economic density. Like, for example, the big green shape here, that's Target. That's not getting redeveloped. At least we hope not. I mean, there's a lot of economic activity at that Target store, but because of the way the real estate market works, I think it's probably because the market for big box stores is a lot less deep than for smaller retail buildings or multi-tenant retail buildings, that the real estate value of the Target store is a lot lower than its actual economic activity suggests, right? So that's why this is not a perfect way to measure economic density, but it's a good kind of a first glance. And you'll see that southern part of our redevelopment area down here, you see a lot of blue and green. Think of this as a heat map. Cooler colors, lower value per acre. Hotter colors, red, orange, higher value per acre. If you want to know what the median property in this area is in terms of value per acre, it's the Crystal Town Center Shopping Center at the northeast corner of Bass Lake Road and Broadway, where the Aldi is. Look at that mall, that's the median for our redevelopment area. The strip along Bass Lake Road of those old buildings right across from Becker Park, that's in the higher category than that. Per acre, that's worth a lot more than many of our commercial properties. And again, reflecting the kind of weirdness of how commercial real estate works, with a couple exceptions, most of our red properties are either residential properties, apartment buildings, or self-storage facilities, because that's what those places are selling for in the open market these days. Nothing that the city can control, but that reality is reflected on this slide. The good news is, you see those magenta asterisks? Those properties are going to see, either are seeing right now or will soon see new development. And council members, EDA members, you're all familiar with those three sites. The Sand Company's apartment building that we just talked about earlier, 5240 Hanson Court, that vacant wedge of land between Hanson Court and the railroad tracks, that was approved by the council last month. And then Crystal Vision Clinic, which opened 2 weeks ago up here at Airport Road and Bottineau Boulevard. Those properties will probably all be orange or hopefully red in terms of property tax value in a couple of years. So we are seeing some improvement in economic density, but you can also see there are some large areas that potentially could be improved with redevelopment. I'm going to pause here because there's a lot of information on this slide and I just talked a lot. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or takeaways from this.
Oh, sorry.
John, you mentioned that you're talking to a lot of developers. What kind of things are they envisioning, or what kind of work do they want to be doing?
They all see this as a place with a lot of unmet demand for market rate multifamily housing. Some would have an affordable component, but the vast majority of them are interested in doing market rate housing of some type, market rate apartments. That's the unmet need that they see in this area.
Anyone else? Oh, Forrest.
I was just wondering, do you think that some of these higher real estate values, like, you know, sellers not, like, essentially, if all the buyers that are interested in this have a price that is lower than what the sellers think they can sell it for, then there's something wrong with the market there. Normally, that's what it kind of means, right? And so do the sellers think that something is coming that has the price overinflated, or I'm just kind of curious why there's such a mismatch between all the reasonable buyers and all the reasonable sellers, that if the price is broken, why is that? Do you have any ideas?
Well, yeah, a couple things. That's a great question. And I think, speculation, and we've heard this from developers though too, is that when they go talk to existing property owners, and they know about the light rail coming, they know about the improvements the city has made, everyone has their own perspective. And so the perspective of many of the existing owners is, I want some of that profit that the developer is going to create by significantly improving the amount of stuff on this piece of land, right? A lot of value is going to be added to this piece of land. I want to capture some of that for myself. The developer's perspective, of course, is, well, I'm doing all the work to make that happen. Why, you should just sell it to me for whatever you could sell it to just on the open market generally. And that's the mismatch, I think, is they just have two different perspectives. Bottom line is, if the current property owners aren't motivated to sell, then the sales don't happen. But I think that's really, they have two different views of like who gets the profit isn't the right word, but who gets the benefit of significantly increasing the value placed on a given size parcel of land.
Are in these discussions you're having with developers, is that something that they're seeing in other communities too that might have bigger projects coming, just not motivated sellers, or is that a Crystal problem?
Yeah, I can't answer that. That market dynamic is everywhere, right? The buyers and sellers with their different perspectives. Again, compared to some other older suburbs, Crystal doesn't have a lot of already vacant, either buildings with a lot of vacant tenant spaces or vacant land. We don't have that problem. So like I said, it's kind of a good problem to have, that we don't have a lot of vacancy. But it's more, I want the commission and the public to understand why redevelopment isn't happening as fast here as it is in some other places. It's just, the conditions here are different.
I have one other quick question. I don't want to delay it, but you just brought it up. So we have a very low overall vacancy rate. Some of those cornerstone or keystone properties are, do you have an idea of the rate of those? Like, I'm thinking like the old half-price books and things like that.
So the half-price book space and the Broadway pizza space are both part of that mall that I was talking about. That's kind of the medium value per acre site where the Aldi is. Those are kind of our two biggest retail spaces that are vacant and have been vacant for some time. We check in with the property owner multiple times, and they're just being very picky about who they will sign leases with. They did have a national sportswear retailer that was going to go in there, and then they backed out. I don't know why. A lot of this stuff is, we don't know, inside baseball kind of stuff. But they have not said there's anything with our zoning or anything like that that's getting in the way. They are just very selective about who they lease spaces to. Now, by contrast, the Crystal Shopping Center, kitty corner from there, which is by far our largest, they don't have much vacancy, right? And I don't know if that is because of how picky they are about leases, or just the way their mall is laid out may be better. I don't know. One thing I do know, though, because we've heard this for years, smaller retail spaces in the last several years have become much easier to lease relative to bigger spaces. And by big, I don't mean like a Walmart or something. I mean 5,000, 7,000 square feet. Those used to be easy to lease compared to the big boxes. Now they're bad. They're hard to lease. The little spaces, 1,000, 2,000 square feet, they can lease those all day long. They never stay vacant very long. So the half-price books, that's around 7,000. Broadway Pizza, that's around 7,000. Those are much more of a challenge to find viable tenants for in the eyes of the mall owners.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Are we looking for a motion? Jim?
Make a motion to approve the work plan as presented.
John?
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So,
Discuss the 2024 work plan.
So, Madam President, this is the final slide. So we need to kind of start a conversation with all of you about, is this enough? Is what we're doing enough, especially with 3 new council members in this year? Do you want us to do more as staff? And what would those things be? Do you want us to do a lot more? How would we make that happen? So this is intended just to start the conversation. The bullet points in each of these 3 boxes are just things that either we're already doing or things that staff has thought maybe we should talk about. There certainly could be other things on these lists added by you or taken off. But let me start with the left-hand box first. And this is basically, this is what we can keep doing indefinitely based on the current the long-term plan in terms of the EDA budget and everything else. These are things that we're doing now. These are sustainable based on the current way we're doing the EDA budget. We can keep doing all these things, again, basically indefinitely. There are some additional things that we could start doing by doing changing the way we allocate staff. Right now, I think it's fair to say that too much of the city manager's time and perhaps the city's planner's time are allocated or paid for by the EDA. So a large portion of EDA expenditures are actually city staff costs. So one of the things that could be done is to look at adjusting that would free up EDA money for actual projects. And so the middle box is kind of laying out what some of those could be. One of the examples is the facade and storefront grants. We're gonna burn through our $30,000 county grant here probably within a month, with 2 more of those coming on, hopefully on the May 2nd agenda, and now it's looking more like May 16th, but you'll be seeing those soon. After that money's gone, we need to figure out how to pay for it with our own funds. That's an example of the kind of thing that modifying the way the staffing is allocated in terms of costs could free up money to do that. Those utility boxes that you see by traffic signals, a lot of other cities, you see those wrapped with artwork. Wouldn't it be great to do something like that to help make downtown Crystal pop a little bit? And maybe even some public art at some kind of reasonable cost. I have some ideas of that. I won't get into. But so that's kind of the middle box. And then in the right box is the big stuff. After 2029, how do we continue the home improvement grants after that TIF money runs out? We keep hearing about Crystal being old and tired, old and tired. We hear that from our residents. Our commercial areas look run down. Well, I mean, there are ways we can fix the public realm, do more of what we've already done in the area around Becker Park, but just do it over a larger area. But that's going to take money. And a couple upcoming projects where there will probably need to be some kind of EDA component to beautify those corridors are 42nd Avenue, right here by Douglas, which is going to be coming up as a joint water commission utility project in the next few years. And then also that Douglas Drive, West Broadway intersection project. There's all kinds of overhead power lines in that area, old worn out medians. Frankly, it's all just kind of ugly. And it's old and worn out. And then finally, the EDA needs to think about whether you want to have funds available to do strategic acquisitions of potential redevelopment properties. So we have a low vacancy rate now and almost no vacant land. But if that changes and a ideal future site comes on the market, and you want the resources to be able to make an offer to buy that, clear it, and make it available for development, that is going to take resources that we don't have in the current financial setup. So I'm just going to stop there, Madam President, and put that all out there for discussion, because we need to start this discussion with you as the commission.
Thank you. Jim?
So, we have been, as far as increases in EDA, I think EDA has kind of gotten the short stick for many, many years. I think we do need to move to help fund that properly. I mean, our goals over the past have been to try to get things funded as they need to be funded so that we can do what we need to do. That being said, I think this particular category has an awful lot to do with the bigger picture of what the financial picture looks like in the budget as a whole. It's going to depend a lot in the near term as to what we do with the big budget, because when you talk about a percentage basis of increase on EDA, we can go quite a few percentages and the dollar amount just doesn't add up to that much, which we're going to have to do at some point in time. The bigger question, I think, for this year is going to be, is this the time? In what I would argue is, in a time of higher inflation and a time of a budget that's quite high as it is, for our second year of the two-year budget. Maybe this isn't the year, but that's going to be part of a larger conversation. In terms of strategic acquisition, I would say strategic acquisition, just like the acquisitions we did for single-family homes, is going to be pretty much driven by the market. If you look back at 2008 and a lot of those acquisitions, there were some amazing deals that the city got. I mean, we were buying houses for $30,000. It was just insane. We are, to your point about strategic acquisition, we do have a greater economic situation where commercial properties could come available. They really could. We've seen some dramatic shifts in terms of people working at home and that sort of thing. So I think when we get to those strategic acquisitions, it's not going to be as burdensome as we think. However, it does warrant some planning. Beyond that, I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on that one.
Do you have a question? Forrest?
I would just like to say thank you very much for your presentation. I echo some of the thoughts of Mayor Adams, but I mean, looking back at one, the council interviews we just had, and then also the election that was for my election, both me and my opponent were saying like pretty much the same thing when it came to some of the items that you've presented here in terms of renovating and improving our commercial districts, especially in Section 2, our downtown, if you will. So I know from my perspective, I know from the perspective of many of the residents in Section 2, I mean, we do want to see an improvement, and I think you look at it as an investment to a certain extent, because if you let things get bad enough and you lose, because they have other options, right, when it comes to where they go to shop and where they want to experience their leisure time, which coffee shops to visit to on a Saturday. And if we see decreases because of not investing and businesses leave, it's really hard to make that up by trying to then invest after we've already seen a decline. So I'd like to, certainly encourage us to do some of that beautification, some of that improvement, some of that development in the public realm, so that we're not playing catch up like some of our other communities that neighbor us kind of are, with lots of investment but catching up, instead of trying to be a little bit proactive, ensuring that we've got medians that aren't sinking into the street or other things like that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Looking for a motion, right?
Just a conversation, isn't it?
Yes, there's no action required. Madam President, we just,
Okay, sorry.
we got some direction, I think, and this is very helpful to help us bring something to you that's a little more fleshed out, I think, is what we need to do next.
I was looking too far down to the agenda. Property status update?
Oh, boy, I have nothing prepared, but we did get the building plans in for Wine Thief and Ale Jail, the former Pizza Hut at 36th and Douglas. So we expect that they will be starting construction very soon, and I am expecting that they will be coming in for fire sprinkler assistance, which is funded out of the EDA fund balance, and then also a facade improvement grant, hopefully.
So, you're not taking the building down, right?
No, they are planning to add on exactly 50%. Of the existing building, so it'll be 50% larger than what's there today. The addition will be on the north side for a giant walk-in beer cooler, state of the art.
Can you say that again, John?
I'm sorry, did my enthusiasm bubble over? Sorry.
Are they still planning on having like a tasting area and whole?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yep, that's more in the front of the store, but yeah, they'll have a tasting area as well.
When do they are thinking they're going to be ready to open? Is it a year?
I would guess by later this year.
Okay.
Wild guess. I don't know how long it'll take to do the construction work, but I expect they'll be under construction within a month or two.
Okay. David, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just thinking about kind of vacant properties. It was an old, it's across from Target, across Broadway. It was an old like tire shop. I can't remember what
Oh,
it was
yeah.
called. You have like an update on that? I feel like it's been a while since we talked about that one. That one just came to mind. We were talking about stuff.
That's a great one to bring up because it would be a key piece to be joined with the southern end of the largely vacant part of the Crystal Gallery Mall where the two-story office tower is, which is almost all vacant except for the child care center. There could be a redevelopment site there. We've had many new interested parties, but the problem with the tire shop site by itself is it's just too small for most apartment developers to make something work there. We've certainly talked about it with multiple developers. Some developers, well, one of the ones that was looked at was the Crystal Gallery Mall, and they couldn't, again, make the numbers work with the owner. So my guess is that the tire shop property, this is at 55th and Broadway, the Big O Tires, will be demolished and redeveloped for something. We just don't know what yet. And I've said this before, but just as a reminder, commercial real estate moves at a very different pace than residential. Residential moves much more fast than commercial real estate. And so it's already been vacant for a couple years, I think, almost. Big O Tires, that building, and it could be vacant for a while longer. That's just the way commercial real estate works until they find the right deal.
Forrest?
Could you give a quick update, if you have one, on the station area planning?
Yes, thank you. So on the May 11th City Council work session agenda, there'll be a presentation from the Station Area Plan Consultant. They're doing an update of the 2016 plan that we did. And the thing to remember about that is most of the implementation items that were in that 2016 plan, the City of Crystal went ahead and did. We rebuilt the streetscape and added the parking on Bass Lake Road. We redid Becker Park. We changed our ordinances to allow development, all those things. Those have happened. So there are two reasons to do a stationary plan update. One is, let's focus on the next set of things that we need to think about doing, but also because the light rail station is changing somewhat and the configuration of that intersection of Bass Lake Road could be radically different based on what the project seems to want to build there. So if you put all that together, those two things are the reason to do the update, and we'll be talking about that on May 11th. Planning Commission, May 8th, the City Council work session on May 11th, and then there'll be some kind of a community meeting late May or early June.
So where are you right now in working with the consultant, I guess?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, we're waiting for them to provide us with their work.
Okay, sounds good.
Sorry.
So they're working on, okay.
Yes,
okay.
I just don't have anything to report yet
Okay.
because we haven't seen the product yet.
All right, thank you.
Any other business? Looking for a motion to, I can't even finish the sentence.
God.
John?
So moved. What about the mayor? Should we wait for the mayor to come back?
You know,
I guess we have,
do we have a second?
I'll second that, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.
all right, now we have the continuation.
Yes.